today, in particular, when things happen that are of significance and of high consequence, that you hope at least are of high consequence, I think it's particularly important to cover what is taking place because that's when the world pays most attention. Unfortunately, the world pays most attention when Israel slaughters not just ordinary Gazans or Gazan civilians or Gazan physicians, but when they slaughter people who, for whatever reason, have some value for or some connection with important Western institutions. That's when a lot of media attention gets focused on it. That's when Western governments feel particularly compelled to speak out, even when Western journalists feel an obligation to raise their voices. And that is an important event relative to just the ordinary slaughter and killing and atrocities that take place there every day. And such an event happened within the last 24 hours. Here from the Financial Times, there you see the headline, Israel forces kill 5 journalists in Gaza. At least 20 people, including media, are dead in strikes on the southern hospital complex. Quote, Israel has killed at least 20 people, including several journalists, in a double strike on Nasser Medical Complex, the largest health facility in southern Gaza. According to the health ministry in the Palestinian enclave, the Gaza health ministry said the 4th floor of the hospital was targeted in the first strike. This was followed by a second hit as ambulance crews arrived to retrieve the dead and wounded. One doctor, Mahmoud al-Habibi, was killed, according to the ministry. Miriam Abu Daga, a visual journalist who worked with the Associated Press during the war, was one of 5 journalists killed. The agency said in a statement it was, quote, shocked and saddened to learn of her death, along with those of other journalists. Al Jazeera said one of its cameramen, Mohammed Salama, was among the casualties. He is the latest in a series of journalists working for the Qatari-controlled news network to have lost their lives in Israeli strikes. The attack also killed Hussam al-Masri, a cameraman who worked with Reuters, photojournalist Moaz Abu Taha, and journalist Ahmed Abu Aziz, according to the Foreign Press Association, which represents journalists working for international media in Israel, the occupied West Bank, and Gaza. So I just want to spend a second talking about double tap strikes. They're things that we actually saw the United States doing during the war on terror. And for a long time, they were the hallmark of groups we consider terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda. And the essence of a double tap strike is that you bomb a certain place, kill a bunch of people, wound a bunch of people, and then you wait for other people to show up to start rescuing the wounded, to start treating the wounded, to start reporting on what happened. And then you do your double tap, your second strike, so that you kill not only the initial people that were in the vicinity where you bombed, but then you kill rescue workers, aid workers, physicians, ambulance drivers, journalists. And that's exactly what happened here. And there's footage of the what is considered to be the second strike, the double tap, where you see these rescue workers in a place that Israel had just bombed on the 4th floor of this hospital. And they are looking for the wounded, they're treating the wounded, and then you'll see the strike because there were journalists there filming it, including several who were killed. I think the video is pretty graphic. It's kind of horrifying. You see the people as they're working on the wounded, and then the next second you see the Israeli strike that was clearly very deliberate. So watch it based on the use of your own discretion, but I think it's important to show it because so many repulsive supporters of Israel constantly, instinctively, automatically claim that every event that's reported that reflects on Israel is a lie, including Barry Weiss, who's engaged in a unparalleled act of genocide denial and atrocity denial masquerading under journalism. She published an editorial today justifying herself and the rag that serves the Israeli military, and it mentioned us and several other people, and so we'll probably respond to that tomorrow. But that's the nature of the evil we're dealing with, is these people who are loyal primarily or solely to Israel will simply deny every single act of evil Israel engages in. And so it's important to show the truth. And here's the video this is from Al Gad TV at the Nasser Hospital overnight in southern Gaza.
مقصود لهذا الزميل الصحفي حسام المصري.
لا حصل الآن نعم. الآن خليك يا الله، راح الدفاع المدني كتلوا الناس، راح الدفاع المدني كتلوا الناس، استهداف كبير الآن كما تشاهدون في هذه الصورة تدمير كبير قصف عنيف جدا.
So first of all, you actually see the people who are killed in that second strike. They're people who are helping carry the wounded, look for the wounded. There are people who are filming, who are documenting. Those are the journalists. There are people treating the wounded. Those are the physicians. And it was a very precise second strike. It happened exactly the same place the first strike took place. And those are the people who ended up being killed, the 20 people. That's how 5 journalists died. Because they know that when there's a bomb, journalists, brave journalists, not like Barry Weiss, who runs a rag that denies everything from afar while she shoves her face full of food and publishes one article after the next, denying that people in Gaza, including children, are dying of starvation. These are actual reporters, very brave reporters, who have been doing this for 22 months, even watching their colleagues deliberately targeted with murder, one after the next. And Israel knows that when there are these strikes, the journalists go there, the rescue workers go there, and the aid workers, as well as doctors. And that's who they intentionally sought out to kill. And that's exactly who they killed. Here from CNN on August 11th, just to show you how repetitive this is, Israel kills multiple journalists in Gaza, including prominent Al Jazeera reporters. Here's the Committee to Protect Journalists. We need to get this date because there's no date on here. And the numbers have increased since then. I believe the number currently of journalists killed in Gaza is 280. I think the Committee to Protect Journalists is a much more rigid form of counting. So they have 192, at least as of the date of this article, which we'll check on. And it says, Israel-Gaza war. Israel is engaged in the deadliest and most deliberate effort to kill and silence journalists that CPJ has ever documented. Let me read that again. Israel is engaged in the deadliest and most deliberate effort to kill and silence journalists that CPJ has ever documented. Palestinian journalists are being threatened, directly targeted, and murdered by Israeli forces and are arbitrarily detained and tortured in retaliation for their work. Media infrastructure in Gaza is systematically destroyed, and censorship has been tightened throughout the West Bank and Israel. And here you see the number of journalists who are killed, and as I said, it's definitely above 200 now, 192, and another 90 in prison. So this is one act of, is obviously wars always entail a lot of horrific acts, a lot of suffering, but there are conventions and laws of war that are observed. There are some wars that entail isolated violations, and then there are wars that are just genocidal, that disregard all constraints and limits on war because the people they're killing are not regarded as human beings. And so there emerges unique evils. Remember, we had the scholar of famine on who said that this was the most minutely engineered famine imposed by man since World War II. There may have been famines where more people were starving, where more people died, but he said this was the most engineered, the most deliberately constructed and imposed. And here you have Israel that, and I want you to just think about this, which blocks all international media from entering Gaza. So you have journalists from all over the world that want to go into Gaza. They want to report on what they see there. They want to report on the starvation. They want to report on the number of children in danger of dying of malnourishment and famine. They want to report on the nature and the amount of the destruction in Gaza. They want to document what they're seeing. Or they'll say, oh, look, there's only 3 kids in a hospital who are malnourished, and all 3 aren't really malnourished because of lack of food. In fact, they have degenerative diseases that has nothing to do with food, and there's food everywhere. And if that were true, Israel, of course, would want them to come in and document that, but Israel doesn't let them in. They handpicked a couple of puppets like Douglas Murray or a couple people they pay. They take them on little excursions for 3 hours in the IDF. They're attached to the IDF, and they show them something they want them to see and say what they want them to say, and they bring them back to Israel, and they go on social media or shows and say it. But real journalists, they don't allow real journalists, any media outlets into Gaza, independent journalists who aren't dependent on the Israeli government or the IDF. Why would you do that? Why would you ban journalists from the place that you're operating, especially when you're disputing what's taking place there? except that you fear the world seeing the truth and the reality of who you are and what you've done. Now, there are journalists in Gaza, Palestinian journalists, who, as I said, have done an incredible job, just remarkably heroic and admirable, of documenting under the most difficult and dangerous circumstances everything that's taking place in Gaza. So we have had journalists document it. The problem is that Israel and its supporters don't just immediately call them liars, but accuse them of being operatives with Hamas, which then by design is justifying their murder, and they're often murdered. There's a huge number of prominent journalists who have been the eyes and ears of the world in Gaza who have been deliberately murdered by the IDF. So they're, on the one hand, preventing independent media from entering, and then on the other, slaughtering all the people who are documenting inside of Gaza what's taking place. And the message they're sending is obvious, which is that if you want to show the world what we're doing inside of Gaza, the reality of what we're doing, you are likely to be the target of one of our missiles or bombs as well. And not just you, but your family. Will blow up your entire house with your parents and grandparents and siblings and spouse and children, as they've done many, many times. The Western media has been shamefully and disgracefully relatively silent. There have been a few noble exceptions. I've said before, Trey Yingst with Fox News, especially given that he works at Fox News, a fanatically pro-Israel outlet owned by Rupert Murdoch, the fanatically pro-Israel Murdoch family, has been loudly protesting the amount of Gazan journalists being murdered by the IDF, but very, very few others have. The Foreign Press Association today issued a statement, given the 5 journalists that were killed, and it says this, quote, "A group of journalists from several major international news outlets, including Reuters, AP, and Al Jazeera, have been killed together in Israeli military strikes. This is among the deadliest Israeli attack on journalists working for international media since the Gaza war began. We demand an immediate explanation from the IDF and the Israeli Prime Minister's office. We call on Israel once and for all to halt its abhorrent practice of targeting journalists. This has gone on far too long. Too many journalists in Gaza have been killed by Israel without justification. Israel continues to block international journalists from independent access to Gaza. This must be a watershed moment." And that's what I was referring to earlier as to why I think it's so crucial to cover the events of the last 24 hours. Because unfortunately, what happens is the world pays most attention when the dead, as part of Israelis' massacres and genocidal acts and ethnic cleansing, are not just ordinary Gazans, but are people who for some reason have value to Western institutions. Each time Israel has killed somebody with a connection to a Western institution, Benjamin Netanyahu has to come out and do what he did today, which he did only because the people who he murdered work for AP and NBC News and Reuters. He doesn't care about Al Jazeera. And so he has to pretend that he feels bad about it because he knows the West is enraged by it. So here's what he said, Benjamin Netanyahu: "Israel deeply regrets the tragic mishap that occurred today at the Nasser hospital in Gaza. We deeply regret what we do every day, every single day when you don't care. We deeply regret this tragic mishap. A mishap. They bombed the hospital, and then when rescue workers and doctors and journalists gathered, as they always predictably do, they bombed that exact spot a second time, and that's a mishap. Israel values the work of the journalists we've been murdering. We value the work of journalists, medical staff, and all civilians. We love all civilians. We value their lives so much. The military authorities are conducting a thorough investigation. The Israeli military authorities, don't worry, they're investigating the IDF, so you'll know soon enough what happened here. Our wars with Hamas terrorists, our just goals are defeating Hamas and bringing our hostages home." The hostages' families know that that's a lie. They don't care at all about the hostages. They've had many opportunities to get the hostages back. In fact, just last week, Hamas agreed to a ceasefire agreement that the Americans presented that would have let half of the living hostages go back, and the Israelis just ignored it because they just want to keep killing. The hostages have nothing to do with this war other than serving as a good pretext. So Israel does this every day, and then they feign regret and remorse when they know that Western governments and Western institutions have to object. The German Foreign Office, and this is the foreign ministry of a government, Germany, that provides 30% of all of the weapons Israel has used to destroy Gaza and kill as many Gazans as they can. Over the last 22 months, they just keep feeding Israel money and arms. Germany does. And their foreign office today also had to feign shock and horror, whatever, and this is what they said. We are shocked by the killing. Shocked by the killing of several journalists, rescue workers, and other civilians in an Israeli airstrike on the Nasser hospital in Gaza. This attack must be investigated. Journalists and media workers play an essential role in putting the spotlight on the devastating reality of war. We have repeatedly called on the Israeli government to allow immediate independent foreign media access and afford protection for journalists operating in Gaza. Okay, first of all, anyone who says they're shocked by what happened in Gaza today is completely lying. This is what Israel has been doing every day, every single day, since October 7th, other than the couple of ceasefires that happened temporarily. They do this every single day. People only care a little bit more today, and they'll forget about it tomorrow because the people who were killed work with media institutions in the West that now have to raise their voices. So the idea that we're shocked by what Israel did, that is pathetic. It would be shocking if a day went by when Israel didn't do this. That would be shocking, way more shocking. And what value do these statements have from Germany, this shock, when Germany is the one that provides the weapon and continues to provide these weapons? It's like what the Biden administration used to do every day. We are deeply concerned about these humanitarian crises. We've asked Israel to be more careful in targeting civilians, but who cares? The U.S. just kept feeding them the weapons and the money. And it was all just theater to clean their conscience. Here, just by the way, is the article in Deutsche Welle, which is a German newspaper, in July of 2024. War in Gaza, Germany supplies 30% of Israel's arms import, second only to the United States. Here is, and this actually probably requires a trigger warning, even more fervent than the one that I provided for the actual killing. It's an Israeli Defense Force official. His name is Efi Defrin. And here he is saying that Israel would never, ever target civilians. It's just not what we do. We're the world's most moral army, and we really lament the accident that you're paying attention to because it happened to be people who work with Western journalists. Here's what he said.
Earlier today, IDF troops carried out a strike in the area of Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. We are aware of reports that harm was caused to civilians, including journalists. I would like to be clear from the start. The IDF does not intentionally target civilians. The IDF makes every effort to mitigate harm to civilians while ensuring the safety of our troops. Any incident that raises concern in this regard is addressed by the relevant mechanisms in the IDF. We are operating in an extremely complex reality. Hamas terrorists deliberately use civilian infrastructure, including hospitals.
You know what? I can't take it. I can't take his accent. I can't take his face. We've heard it all before. Hamas intentionally hides behind. It's all Hamas's fault. Gaza is one of the most densely populated places on earth. There is nowhere for Hamas to operate except in the civilian infrastructure. They're part of the civilian population. They're the government of Gaza. They administer the government of Gaza. It's not like Israel, where you have large open spaces where you could put your military facilities. And of course, Israel doesn't do that. Israel buries their military headquarters in the heart of Tel Aviv, so that when countries strike back like Iran did and aim at military facilities, they're forced to target the civilian areas where the IDF purposely places their military and Mossad installations. You just watch what they did. They bombed the hospital once, and then when they saw the people coming to rescue them, they bombed it again. And at this point, whether Israel, quote unquote, intentionally targets civilians, and of course they do, they've targeted many, many journalists, just to put as one example. It doesn't really matter. The reality is that they don't view Gaza as having innocent civilians. Many officials in Israel have said that, part of the government. There's no such thing as an innocent civilian in Gaza. So they don't need to target or not target civilians. They're willing to kill everyone recklessly because they place no value on their lives. And this is what they've been doing every day. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.